Students, in the previous class, in one of the early lectures of this chapter, we have talked about all the different levels of biological organizations, as I have told you in the beginning classes. So these biological organizations, the levels of biological organizations will start from the range of macromolecules, and it can range up to the biome. So macromolecules, then macromolecules within the cell, and then we come to the level of the cells, then a group of cells called tissues, then tissues to organ system, organism. So like this it goes on up to where? Biome. And a particular species, if you consider Homo sapiens as a species, so if individuals of one particular species are concentrated at one geographical area or in any habitat, right, and that group of that one species can be called as populations. Try to understand. So you cannot call two different species staying in one area, a group of two different species or many different species living in one area or habitat cannot be called as population. You can, if you consider 10 pigs and 10 dogs, you cannot call it, you can neither call it as a population of dogs nor call it as a population of pigs, right? So if there are donkeys and horses, so you can neither call it as a population of horse nor you can call it as a population of donkeys, right? So in order to be called as a population, it must be all the organisms or all the individuals in that group must be belonging to the same species. That is what is called as population. See, until now you have studied about the different interactions like responses or maybe interaction with the biotic and abiotic components of the environment, the responses of the biotic components towards the abiotic components, and also we have learnt about the adaptations shown by different living organisms, right, as a response to abiotic components. So until now we have spoken, we have learnt in the context of what organism, individual organism. But now here onwards in this chapter we will talk in terms of populations. See, you may be wondering, you may be thinking that when you talk about a single human being or if you consider a group of human beings, it is nothing but the same. You may think so, but it is actually not the same. See, if you want to define or if you want to talk about a single individual in the population, so you may talk about if there is a dog, maybe the color of the dog, the skin color of the dog may be brown and the color of the eye may be black, right? So it may be having a long tail and thick fur, right? So that is the characteristic of one individual organism in that group. But when you try to define a population of a particular species, you may say that yes, the population of this dog may belong to a particular breed, right? So maybe German Shepherd or something else, right? So like that, when you are addressing a population, the characteristics or attributes of a population will be different from that of the characteristics or attributes of an individual organism. So andre individual organism na ನಾವು characteristic ಹೇಳಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ individual organism ಅನ್ನು ನಾವು define ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ, so what characteristics we use, they are different from those characteristics when we talk about population. So and how population is different from the individual. See, population ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಏನು ಅಂತ already ಹೇಳಿದೆ ನಿಮಗೆ. See, population ecology is a very important branch of ecology. When you study about ecology in depth, you will get a separate branch of ecology called population ecology. It is very important for you to study population ecology under the ecology. It is because, see, it is an important link. It acts as an important link. It's an area which links ecology to population genetics and evolution. See, andre when you say about, when you look at the variations, when you look at the evolution, so you can consider any evolutionary theory. So none of the evolutionary scientists, they talked about the evolution in a single living organism. They talked about the evolution in a population, in a group of living organisms. See, it is also very obvious that any living organism, ಯಾವುದೇ ಇರಲಿ ಅದು, any species it may be belonging to, it must be living in a population no matter how small the population is. right? If it is a monkey, it has its own family, right? If it is a dog, it has its own family. So that means it will survive, it has to survive in a population of its own species. That means, so it is interdependent on other individuals of the same species. Maybe for protection, maybe for food, maybe for reproduction, right? There are various biological activities for which the organism has to depend upon another individual organism belonging to the same species, right? So when this is the case, obviously if one individual organism develops some change, some adaptation, and this adaptation in the meanwhile it will become a variation and it will become an evolutionary aspect, so it will not only influence that single organism there, it is also going to influence on other individuals of that population. Andre, so if one organism happens to change according to the environmental condition, the same change is also applicable to other individuals of the population, right? So that means whenever you are talking about the variations or evolution, so you are talking with respect to population, not with respect to individual, right? So when we study reproductive biology in a larger aspect, in a larger context, so we all talk about populations, right? So even in the case of the production of the offspring, it can be, or next generations, so we all are talking with respect to population, not with respect to an individual organism. So that is why population genetics, that means a gene pool. So whenever you are talking about the gene pool, that means that it is the entire genetic makeup of a population belonging to one species. ಒಂದು ಸ್ಪೀಶೀಸ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಈಗ there are 100 human beings which have been kept for experimentation ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಆ 100 human beings ನಾವು ಏನು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, we are going to check the genes, and the entire genes or entire what is that DNA or the genes which are present in all those organisms will be called as gene pool, right? So a gene pool ಹೇಗೆ evolve ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, so that is what we are going to study, and that is why population genetics so and evolution is very important, but that is studied under the separate branch of ecology called population ecology, right? So it is important because it is at the population level natural selection operates. I just told you, any evolutionary theory you can consider, so evolutionary theories, they work at the level of population, not at the level of individuals. So that is to be understood, right? So population attributes. So in order to understand how population is different from the individual, see, just like how we talk about the birth and death. In the case of individual, if you talk about one individual organism, you say this is born or this is dead, right? But you cannot say the same thing for a population. What do we consider for a population is not birth and death, but instead of birth and death, we consider birth rate and death rate. Andre ಒಂದು population ನಲ್ಲಿ, so on an average in a given duration of time, especially birth rate ಮತ್ತು death rate ಅನ್ನು ಕ್ಯಾಲ್ಕುಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ, so we also have to pay attention to what the lifespan of that particular species. If you are talking about the population of human beings, the normal lifespan can be considered up to 100 years maximum, isn't it? So if you are talking about the elephant population, 60 years. So that is the lifespan, that is the duration. And in that duration, you are talking about the lifespan, that is the birth rate and death rate, right? So this is nothing but the percentage or per capita birth and death details, right? So let us consider a few examples here. In a pond, there were 20 lotus plants. Okay, imagine there is a pond consisting of 20 lotus plants, and next year what happens? 8 new lotus plants have been born. So this year there were 20, and next year when was seen, so there were 8 new plants that were produced here, and so totally 28. And what is to be calculated here? The birth rate in 1 year. So just to calculate, 8 divided by 20, which will be 0.4, is nothing but the birth rate per year of the lotus plants in that particular pond. Okay, so our particular pond alli, in 1 year of duration, the birth rate will be 0.4. Similarly, death rate can be also calculated in the same manner. If 4 individuals in a laboratory population of 40 fruit flies anta helidre, they are called the what is that, the generic name of the fruit flies is Drosophila, The scientific name is Drosophila melanogaster anta karitare. Okay, so usually you have seen on the rotting fruits, small flies will be sitting. They will be feeding upon that decaying fruit material. And so in the laboratory condition, 40 fruit flies were cultured, and so what happened was, 4 of the individuals from that population of 40 individuals, they died, and in the interval of 1 week, because the lifespan of these fruit flies will be 1 week maximum. So that is why we are taking the duration as 1 week. In 1 week 4 individuals died, and you are calculating the death rate per week. How? 4 divided by 40, that will be 0.1 is the death rate of fruit flies in that 1 week. So that is how the birth rate and death rate can be calculated here, right? So this is one attribute. This is one of the attributes of population, that is the birth rate and death rate. I hope it is clear for you. The next here is sex ratio. See, when you are talking about an individual, you will either define the individual as a male organism or female organism. Maybe in human beings you can also call it as a transgender, right? So it is neither male nor female. So in any organism, if you are talking about a plant, so either you can say it is a bisexual or unisexual, right? So you have learnt in the first chapter in the organisms, reproduction organisms, hermaphrodites, monoecious plants and dioecious plants, all that you have learnt. So when you are talking with respect to an individual organism, so you have to clearly define the sex of that plant or the gender of that plant, yes or no? But you cannot do so to a population, right? So you cannot do so a group of 100 human beings. There may be males also, there may be females also. That is why we give sex ratio here. That means in the 100 people, how many of them are males and how many of them are females, right? So that is what is called as sex ratio. If there is a population of 1 lakh in a defined geographical area, so we are going to calculate the percentage of males present in that area and also the females present in that area, percentage of males and females. That is what is called as sex ratio. Maybe 40% females or 60% males, or maybe vice versa, 50% males, 50% females. So if there are 10 human individuals here, so if 5 of them are ladies and 5 of them are gents, and obviously what will be the sex ratio? 50% male and 50% female. So that is how we calculate the sex ratio. That means, so population attribute, we are talking about sex ratio, not the individual sex or individual gender. The next attribute here is age distribution by using the age pyramids. See, again, when we talk about a single individual, you can clearly define what age of the individual is, right? So again, depending upon the lifespan of the individual, all that, so you will define the age of the individual, right? Maybe in weeks, maybe in days, maybe in months, or maybe in years, for different living organisms based on the lifespan of that individual organism, right? Here, when you are talking about the entire population of a species, you cannot talk what? You cannot talk the age, you cannot talk about the age of a single organism there. That is why we talk about age distribution when we talk with respect to the population, right? See here, so by using these 3 pyramids, we are trying to distribute, we are trying to have the age distribution in a population. See, in this pyramid, you can see pre-reproductive, that is the pre-reproductive means the immature individuals, maybe human beings or any organism. So if you consider this for human beings, so the representation of age pyramids for human population. So when you are taking the example of human beings, so here this is called as expanding pyramid. Expanding anta yaake kariteve anta helidre, so here you can see pre-reproductive anta helidre younger age, that means immature human beings are higher in number. The number of young ones are higher, and the number of reproductive human beings is little lesser than this pre-reproductive phase. Andre, so these individuals have given rise, these individuals have given birth to the young ones, which are many more in number than compared to the elders. Andre, idu one generation, idu one generation, idu one generation. This is post-reproductive. So you can imagine, so these blue alliruvantaharu, these may be the kids of the post-reproductive phase alliruvantaha people, right? The yellow phase, yellow line is showing it is a generation which is produced by the reproductive phase, the people who are in the reproductive phase. I hope you are getting an idea. ಅಂದರೆ ಈ ಜನರೇಷನ್ಗಿಂತ ಈ ಜನರೇಷನ್ನವರು ಸಂಖ್ಯೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆಚ್ಚಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಅಗೇನ್ this generation has got more number than the reproductive phase generation. So that means when kids are more, obviously population is growing antalva. That is why this is called as expanding pyramid, right? Whereas you can look at this one, this is called as stable pyramid. Yake? The number of individuals in the reproductive phase and the number of individuals in the pre-reproductive phase. Andre, so individuals who have produced their young ones, the number of individuals which have been produced, it is same as that of their parents. But the only thing is that ಇಲ್ಲಿ ತುಂಬ ಓಲ್ಡ್ ಏಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹವರು ಅಂದರೆ ಇವರ ಫೋರ್ ಫಾದರ್ಸ್ ಏನಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಇದೆ, ಅದು ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಕಂಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿದರೆ ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಮಚ್ ಮೋರ್ ದ್ಯಾನ್ ದಿಸ್ ಒನ್. ವೆರಾಸ್ ಮತ್ತು ಬ್ಲೂಗೂ ಮತ್ತು ನಾವೆಲ್ಲೋ ಕಂಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ವೆರಾಸ್ ರಿಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಪ್ರೀ ರಿಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಫೇಸ್ನಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ಜನರು ಸೊ ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಸೇಮ್ ನಂಬರ್ಲಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಸ್ಟೇಬಲ್. ದೇರ್ ಇಸ್ ನೀದರ್ ಗ್ರೋತ್ ನಾರ್ ಡಿಕ್ರೀಸ್ ಇನ್ ದ ನಂಬರ್ ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್. Here this is called declining because so reproductive phase alliruvantaha janaru, they are producing their progeny which are lesser in number than compared to their own generation. ಅಲ್ವಾ? ಸೊ ಈ ಜನರೇಷನ್ ಇದ್ದವರು ತಮ್ಮ ಮಕ್ಕಳನ್ನ ಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸೊ ದೀಸ್ ಕಿಡ್ಸ್ ವಿಚ್ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಬೀನ್ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ಡ್ ಬೈ ದೀಸ್ ಪೀಪಲ್, ದೇ ಆರ್ ಲೆಸ್ಸರ್ ಇನ್ ನಂಬರ್ ದ್ಯಾನ್ ಕಂಪೇರ್ಡ್ ಟು ದೀಸ್. ದಟ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ದ ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಈಸ್ ಡಿಕ್ಲೈನಿಂಗ್. ಸೊ ದಟ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ಬೈ ಹ್ಯಾವಿಂಗ್ ದ ಏಜ್ ಡಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿಬ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಪಿರಮಿಡ್ಸ್ ವಿ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಟಾಕ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ದ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪಾನ್ಷನ್, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಹೌ ದ ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಈಸ್ ಗ್ರೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಇನ್ ಅ ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ geographical area, whether the population is growing or the population is stable or the population is declining. ಇದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಮಾತಾಡಬಹುದು. And this is possible only when we talk with respect to the population. This is one of the population attributes, right? Then the next attribute is population density. Population density means you have come across this word density in physics also, in chemistry also, and sometimes in biology also. Density anta helidre molecules. If you consider a chamber, if you consider small chamber, a particular chamber nalli yaudo ondu molecule ide, and how many molecules are there in that particular chamber? If the molecules are more, it is said to be more dense. If the molecules are less, it is said to be less denser, right? So population density kuda ನಾವು ಹಾಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. The size of the population. ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಸೈಜ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಇನ್ 100 ಕಿಲೋಮೀಟರ್ಸ್ ಏರಿಯಾದಲ್ಲಿ ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಸೈಜ್? ದಟ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ಹೌ ಮೆನಿ ಇಂಡಿವಿಜುವಲ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ಬೀಯಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ದೇರ್. ಸೊ ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಕೌಂಟೆಡ್ ಫಾರ್ ವಾಟ್ ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಡೆನ್ಸಿಟಿ. ಸೊ ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಸೈಜ್ ಈಸ್ ಅ ಮೆಷರ್ ಆಫ್ ಸ್ಟೇಟಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಅ ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಗಿವನ್ ಇನ್ ದಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಬಿಟಟ್. ಅಂದರೆ ವೆದರ್ ದ ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಈಸ್ ಹೈ ಆರ್ ಲೋ ಆರ್ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಸ್ಟೇಬಲ್ ಆಸ್ ದಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಪ್ರೀವಿಯಸ್ ಜನರೇಷನ್. ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಸ್ಟೇಟಸ್ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ತಿಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದರೆ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ಟಾಕ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಸೈಜ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಡೆನ್ಸಿಟಿ. ಸೊ ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಸೈಜ್ ಮೇ ಬಿ ಆಸ್ ಲೋ ಆಸ್ ಲೋವರ್ ದನ್ 10. ಅಂದರೆ ಈಗ ಸೈಬೀರಿಯಾದಿಂದ ಬರುವಂಥ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟಾಕ್ಡ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ದ ಮೈಗ್ರೇಷನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಡಿಸ್ಕಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಸೊ ಅ ಕೈಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಬರ್ಡ್ಸ್, ರೈಟ್, ವಿಚ್ ಮೈಗ್ರೇಟ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಸೈಬೀರಿಯಾ ಟು ಇಂಡಿಯಾ, ಎಸ್ಪೆಷಲಿ ಟು ದ ಭರತ್ಪುರ್ ವೆಟ್ಲ್ಯಾಂಡ್ಸಿಗೆ ಬರುವಂತಹದ್ದು. ಸೊ ದೇ ಮೇ ಬಿ ಆಸ್ ಲೆಸ್ ಆಸ್ 10 ಆರ್ ಲೆಸ್ ದನ್ 10 individuals, right? So but that is the population density there, right? That is the size of the population. Or it may go up to millions of organisms as you talk about the microorganisms such as Chlamydomonas, right? So microorganism ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನೀವು ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ so you culture it on a petri plate and millions of organisms can be produced. But when you're talking about the bigger animals or birds, so the population size can be smaller, alva? So that is why population density, population size, more technically it can be called as population density anta karibodu ನಾವು, ಅಲ್ವಾ? So population size will actually depict what population density, ಅಲ್ವಾ? in a geographical area ಎಷ್ಟು ಡೆನ್ಸಿಟಿ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. So which will be numerically or it can be symbolically called as n. ನೆನಪಿಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. So we are going to have a formula about population density in the coming classes, right? So it need not necessarily be always measured in numbers. ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ನಂಬರಲ್ಲಿ ಮೆಜರ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದರೆ, ಇಫ್ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಅ ಕಲ್ಚರ್ ಆಫ್ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ಟೀರಿಯಲ್ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್, ಇಫ್ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಅ ಕಲ್ಚರ್ ಆಫ್ ಫಂಗಲ್ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್, ಇಫ್ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಅ ಕಲ್ಚರ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಕ್ಲಮೈಡೋಮೋನಾಸ್ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್, ಯು ಕೆನಾಟ್ ಗೋ ಆನ್ ಕೌಂಟಿಂಗ್ ಈಚ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಎವ್ರಿ ಮೈಕ್ರೋ ಆರ್ಗ್ಯಾನಿಸಮ್ ದೇರ್ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಸೊ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಓನ್ಲಿ ಸೇ ಮೇ ಬಿ ವೇಟ್ ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ನಾವು ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಸೊ ಪರ್ ಸ್ಕ್ವೇರ್ ಸೆಂಟಿಮೀಟರ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಬಯೋಮಾಸ್ ಇದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಅ ಬಯೋಮಾಸ್. ಸೊ ದಟ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ this population density in most of the cases for higher animals and higher plants, we consider this as size of the population, but for lower organisms it cannot be size, it should be considered in the form of biomass. Sometimes like you can, if you compare with a banyan tree, parthenium ಮತ್ತು banyan tree ಅನ್ನು ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಿ. Parthenium is a very small plant, it's a herbaceous plant. Banyan tree is huge. The number of Parthenium can be 100 in a given area. There may be only one banyan tree. And if you compare with respect to biomass, which will be bigger? Obviously the biomass of the banyan tree is much more higher than compared to the Parthenium. But in this case population size ನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಮಾತಾಡಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ, because the number of the Parthenium is more than compared to the banyan tree. That is why it is very important whenever we study about the population density, we need to think which measure should be considered, whether we should consider the population size or we should consider the biomass ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಸೊ ಸಂದರ್ಭಕ್ಕೆ ತಕ್ಕ ಹಾಗೆ whenever it is lower organisms which cannot be counted, so in that case we usually consider the biomass. So countable organisms ittu ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ we usually consider population size, right? So this is about population density. So relative density, ಹಲವಾರು ಸಲ most of the cases we do not consider the absolute population density ಅನ್ನು ತೆಗಿಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗುವುದಿಲ್ಲ. ಯಾಕೆ? ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಸೊ ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಮೇ ಬಿ ಫ್ಲಕ್ಚುಯೇಟಿಂಗ್. ಇಫ್ ಯು ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ದ ನಂಬರ್ ಆಫ್ ಫ್ರಾಗ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ಅ ಗಿವನ್ ಪಾಂಡ್, ಒಂದು ಪಾಂಡಲ್ಲಿರುವ ಫ್ರಾಗ್ಸನ್ನು ನೀವು ವಾಟ್ ಎಟ್ ಅ ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಟೈಮ್ ನೀವು ಕ್ಯಾಲ್ಕುಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದರೆ, ಈಗ ಅಟ್ ದಿಸ್ ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಟೈಮ್ ದೇರ್ ಮೇ ಬಿ 100 ಫ್ರಾಗ್ಸ್, ಮೇ ಬಿ ಇನ್ ದ ಆಫ್ಟರ್ನೂನ್, ಮೇ ಬಿ 2 hours ಲೇಟರ್ ದ ನಂಬರ್ ಆಫ್ ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಆರ್ ದ ಸೈಜ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಮೇ ಗೆಟ್ ಡಿಕ್ರೀಸ್ಡ್, ಮೇ ಬಿ once again in the night it may get once again increased. That is why so we define or we consider relative density of an organism. So for certain ecological investigations there is no need to know the absolute population density of any living organism or any population. So you can consider, so this example, number of fish caught per trap. ಹೇಗೆ ನಾವು relative density ಅನ್ನು ಕ್ಯಾಲ್ಕುಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದರೆ, so a fisherman goes into the sea and in ಒಂದು ಟ್ರ್ಯಾಪ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಫಿಶ್ಗಳು ಸಿಗುತ್ತೆ. Okay, so by taking around 10 traps, so average ಅನ್ನು ಕ್ಯಾಲ್ಕುಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಸೊ these are nothing but what, there are 10 trials, just like how you do different experiments, titration experiments ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಿ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಸೊ physics experiment ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಿ. So just like how we will take some 10 trials, based on that we will do what, we will approximately calculate the relative density, because in a large ocean you cannot go on counting, and you can never do that, you cannot go on counting the number of fishes present. ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಸ್ಪೀಶೀಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಫಿಶಸ್ ಎಷ್ಟಿದೆ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಹೇಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗೋದೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದ್ಯಾಟ್ ಓನ್ಲಿ ವಿ ಗೋ ಫಾರ್ ವಾಟ್, ರಿಲೇಟಿವ್ ಡೆನ್ಸಿಟಿ. And not only fishes, in some cases like you cannot count certain animals which are found in the wild, in the forest. ಲೈಕ್ ಕೆಲವು ಟೈಗರ್ಸು, ಬೇರ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಅವು ನಮಗೆ ಇಮಿಡಿಯೇಟ್ಲಿ ಕಣ್ಣಿಗೆ ಕಾಣೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಈವನ್ ವಲ್ಚರ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಸೊ especially for tigers, cheetah and many other wild animals, we take into account of pug marks ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದರೆ ಹೆಜ್ಜೆ ಗುರುತುಗಳು. So we will take into account the pug marks or fecal pellets. Fecal pellets means what? The excretory material. So based on that, pug marks ಎಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟೆಷ್ಟಿದೆ, based on that relative density of that population in that area can be calculated. Similarly, fecal pellets, ಎಷ್ಟು frequently fecal pellets ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದೆ ಆ geographical areaದಲ್ಲಿ ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಮೇಲೆ ಕೂಡ we will calculate the relative density of that particular species. Okay, so this is regarding the population attributes. So in the population attributes we have studied about what, birth and death rate. There are 4 population attributes, that is birth and death rate, then sex ratio is second one, then age distribution, age pyramids is the third one, population density is the fourth one. So you need to remember these things. ಇದನ್ನ ನಿಮಗೆ ಡಯಾಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಕೂಡ ಕೇಳಬಹುದು, or it was asked many times in CET as well as in NEET. So expanding ಯಾವುದು, stable ಯಾವುದು, declining ಯಾವುದು, ಯಾವುದು ಅಂತ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿರಬೇಕು. ಇಫ್ ಯು ನೋ ದ ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಈಸಿಲಿ ಐಡೆಂಟಿಫೈ ವಿಚ್ ಒನ್ ಈಸ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಯಾಂಡಿಂಗ್, ವಿಚ್ ಒನ್ ಈಸ್ ಡಿಕ್ಲೈನಿಂಗ್, ವಿಚ್ ಒನ್ ಈಸ್ ಸ್ಟೇಬಲ್ ಅಂತ ನೀವು ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು, ರೈಟ್? ಸೊ ಇನ್ ದ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ we will see the further things about the population, that is interaction among the organisms in a population. So that we will see in the next session.